What if I told you Stoicism isn't just about gritting your teeth through life's challenges, it's about becoming magnetic? That's right. This ancient philosophy, often misunderstood as cold or unfeeling, holds the secret to an allure so powerful it naturally draws people toward you, especially women. Think about the last time you met someone who radiated calm confidence, who seemed unshaken by chaos, who carried themselves with quiet authority. That kind of presence isn't luck or genetics, it's cultivated. And here's the kicker: Stoicism teaches you how to master it. Picture this: you're at a social gathering, and instead of sweating over what to say or how you're being perceived, you're fully present. Your energy is grounded, your humor effortless, your conversations engaging without being forced. Women notice this instantly. It's not about tricks or scripts. It's about embodying a mindset so rooted in self-assurance that attraction becomes a side effect. History's most iconic figures, from Marcus Aurelius to modern leaders, didn't chase validation. They focused on mastery, and in doing so, became impossible to ignore. That's the power of Stoic magnetism. Now, imagine unlocking 25 specific mindsets that reshape how you move through the world, how you handle setbacks, and most importantly, how women perceive you. These aren't surface-level hacks. They're deep shifts in perspective that transform anxiety into charisma, neediness into genuine confidence, and awkwardness into effortless charm. Over the course of this video, we'll explore each one, giving you the tools to stop chasing attention and start commanding it. Because when you operate from this place of unshakable inner strength, something fascinating happens. People, especially women, lean in to discover more. Ready to begin? Let's dive in. Confidence isn't about puffing your chest or faking bravado. It's about knowing deep down that you can handle whatever comes your way. Stoicism calls this unshakable confidence, and it starts with a simple but profound shift, focusing only on what's within your control. Think about Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled an empire while facing wars, betrayals, and personal loss. His journals reveal a man who refused to be rattled by external chaos. Why? Because he understood that his power lay in his reactions, his choices, his mindset. That's the core of Stoic confidence. It's not about controlling the world, but mastering yourself. Women sense this kind of assurance instinctively. It's not about being the loudest in the room or the slickest talker. It's the quiet certainty of a man who doesn't need validation, who isn't thrown off by rejection or awkward moments. Picture a guy who laughs at his own mistakes instead of crumbling into self-doubt, who holds eye contact without aggression, who listens more than he boasts. That's magnetic, and here's the secret: this confidence isn't reserved for emperors or legends. Stoicism teaches that it's available to anyone willing to train their mind. Let's break it down. Every day, you face things you can't control: how others perceive you, whether she texts back, the unpredictable twists of life. Stoicism doesn't ignore these realities. It strips away their power over you. Instead of worrying, "Does she like me?" you ask, "Am I acting with integrity? Am I present and genuine?" That shift alone changes everything. Women are drawn to men who aren't desperate for approval, because desperation reeks of insecurity. But when you're anchored in self-respect, when your worth isn't tied to outcomes, you radiate a different energy. It's not arrogance, it's the calm of a man who knows his value. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That's the essence. When you stop outsourcing your confidence to external validation, likes, matches, fleeting attention, you become unshakable. And that's irresistible. Imagine a ship in a storm. Its strength isn't in avoiding the waves, but in riding them without capsizing. That's the power of emotional control, the second Stoic mindset that transforms how women perceive you. Most men think attraction is about grand gestures or flashy displays, but here's the truth: nothing kills chemistry faster than emotional volatility. Women aren't looking for a man who's never upset. They're drawn to one who isn't hijacked by his emotions. Stoicism doesn't teach suppression, it teaches mastery. The difference: suppression is a ticking time bomb. Mastery is the ability to feel deeply without being controlled by those feelings. Take Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who faced exile, betrayal, and even the whims of a tyrant like Nero. His letters reveal a man who acknowledged anger, fear, and disappointment, yet refused to let them dictate his actions. That's the allure of emotional stability. Picture two men in a heated argument. One escalates, voice shaking, ego bruised. The other stays composed, listens, and responds with precision. Who would you trust? Who would you respect? Women ask these questions instinctively. Emotional control signals reliability, maturity, and strength, qualities that outshine any pickup line. Here's where most men go wrong. They confuse reactivity with passion. They think losing their temper makes them seem intense or invested, but it's just insecurity in disguise. Stoicism flips this script. When you practice pausing before reacting, when you create space between stimulus and response, you radiate a different energy. It's not indifference, it's intentionality. A woman notices when you don't crumble under stress, when a rude comment rolls off your back, when you handle rejection with grace. These moments build attraction because they reveal character. Epictetus, born a slave, put it bluntly: it's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. This mindset isn't just philosophical, it's practical. Next time you feel frustration rising, ask, will this emotion serve me or sabotage me? Anger might feel justified, but will it improve the situation? Anxiety might feel inevitable, but will it change the outcome? Stoicism trains you to interrogate your emotions, not obey them. That's the secret. Women aren't drawn to men who pretend to feel nothing. They're drawn to men who feel everything and still choose their behavior with clarity. Contrast this with the guy who sulks after a bad day, who snaps under pressure, who lets jealousy poison his relationships. Emotional volatility is repellent not because emotions are weak, but because lack of control is. The Stoic doesn't avoid emotions, he transcends them. And that's magnetic. When you meet chaos with calm, when you respond instead of react, you don't just become more attractive, you become the kind of man people remember. There's a fundamental paradox in attraction. The more you crave approval, the less likely you are to receive it. Stoics understood this centuries ago, and it's why the third mindset, cultivating indifference to external validation, is so transformative. This isn't about becoming cold or aloof. It's about shifting your focus from being liked to being grounded in your own worth. Think of it like this: a man who constantly checks his phone for her reply, who alters his opinions to match hers, who fears saying the wrong thing, he's broadcasting neediness. And neediness is the antithesis of magnetism. Now contrast that with a man who engages authentically, not because he's hoping to win favor, but because he's genuinely curious. He doesn't fish for compliments or panic at silence. He's comfortable in his own skin, and that comfort is contagious. Women sense this lack of agenda. It creates space for real connection because she's not being used as a mirror for your ego. The Stoics called this ataraxia, a state of calm where your peace isn't mortgaged to others' opinions. How do you build this? Start with a simple but brutal exercise. Pay attention to every instance you seek validation today. Did you laugh louder at her joke than you felt? Did you withhold an opinion to avoid disagreement? These subtle compromises erode your authenticity. The Stoic fix: practice negative visualization. Imagine losing her approval entirely. Sit with that discomfort until you realize you're still intact. Your worth wasn't in her hands to begin with. Epictetus, the philosopher who taught while impoverished, put it bluntly: if someone told you that others spoke ill of you, would you defend yourself? No, you'd say, they don't know my other faults, or they'd have mentioned those too. That's the humor of indifference. When you stop climbing the ladder of others' esteem, you're free to stand firm on your own ground. Here's the practical shift. Replace validation seeking with value giving. Instead of asking, "Does she like me?" ask, "Does this interaction bring something meaningful to us both?" That reframe alone changes your energy. Women don't fall for men who need them. They're drawn to men who inspire them. And inspiration flows from a man who's already full, not one scraping for crumbs of attention. Marcus Aurelius journaled daily reminders. "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than others, yet care more about their opinion than our own." Break that cycle. Validate yourself first. Speak your mind without apology. Own your quirks, the irony. The less you chase approval, the more it finds you, not because you manipulated it, but because you became someone worth approving of. A life without purpose is like a ship without a rudder. It drifts vulnerable to every current and wind. The Stoics knew this, which is why they placed living with intention at the heart of their philosophy. This isn't about having a 10-step plan or a rigid checklist. It's about aligning your actions with something deeper than fleeting desires. Women aren't just attracted to ambition for its own sake. They're drawn to men who burn with a quiet fire, who move through the world with a sense of why. Purpose isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself, but it's unmistakable in the way a man carries himself, in the choices he makes, in the energy he brings to every room. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, put it plainly: first, tell yourself what kind of person you want to be, then do what you have to do. That's the foundation. Purpose isn't about external achievements, it's about inner alignment. A man who knows his values, who acts with integrity, who stands for something beyond himself, that's magnetic. Think of the difference between two men at a party. One name drops his job title, hoping to impress, while the other speaks with genuine passion about his work, his projects, his vision. Who commands attention? Who leaves an impression? Here's where Stoicism flips the script on modern dating advice. Charisma isn't manufactured through tricks or techniques. It's a natural byproduct of a life lived with conviction. When you're anchored in purpose, you stop seeking validation through shallow victories. You're not scanning the room for approval because you're too focused on what matters to you. Paradoxically, that's what makes you intriguing. Women sense when a man's energy isn't scattered, when his conversations aren't performative. They're drawn to the clarity of a man who knows where he's going, even if the destination is still unfolding. Consider Marcus Aurelius again, ruling Rome while journaling about virtue, mortality, and duty. His power didn't come from the throne, it came from his relentless pursuit of meaning. That's the secret. Purpose isn't a resume bullet. It's the thread that ties your actions together, the answer to the question, why do you get out of bed? Maybe it's building something, creating art, serving others, mastering a craft. Whatever it is, when you live it unapologetically, you radiate a different kind of confidence, one that doesn't need to prove itself. And here's the practical shift. Stop asking, "How can I impress her?" Start asking, "How can I live in a way that impresses me?" That's the Stoic mindset. When your purpose is clear, rejection loses its sting. A setback isn't a collapse, it's feedback. A missed connection isn't a failure, it's a redirection. Women respond to this resilience because it signals something rare. A man who isn't derailed by external noise. Purpose also sharpens your presence. Ever notice how the most compelling people listen intensely, speak deliberately, and engage fully? That's not an accident. When you're rooted in something bigger than the moment, you're not rehearsing your next line or calculating impressions. You're there. And that kind of presence, unhurried, undistracted, utterly engaged, is irresistible. It tells a woman she's not just another audience for your ego. She's sharing space with a man who values his time and hers. So how do you cultivate this? Start small. Define what virtue means to you. Is it courage, curiosity, kindness? Then design your days around it. A Stoic doesn't wait for motivation. He creates momentum through action. Read, build, train, create not for applause, but because it's who you are. Over time, that consistency becomes your signature, and when a woman sees that, when she senses you're not just passing time but claiming it, she'll lean in. Not because you tried to impress her, but because you didn't have to. Most people spend their lives running from discomfort, chasing comfort, safety, and the path of least resistance. But the Stoics flipped this instinct on its head with a radical idea: amor fati, the love of fate. This isn't about masochism or pretending hardship doesn't hurt. It's about recognizing that the very things we resist, challenges, setbacks, even pain, are the forge that shapes us into stronger, more compelling men. Think of a blacksmith tempering steel. Fire isn't the enemy, it's the necessary ingredient for strength. That's the essence of amor fati. When you stop seeing discomfort as something to avoid and start embracing it as fuel for growth, something shifts in how you carry yourself, and women notice. Consider two men facing the same rejection. One spirals into self-pity, questioning his worth, while the other shrugs it off with a smirk, thinking, "What did this teach me?" Which one would you bet on? Which one commands respect? Resilience isn't just attractive, it's magnetic. Women aren't drawn to men who crumble at the first sign of friction. They're drawn to those who meet life's sharp edges with a quiet confidence, who see obstacles as part of the plot, not the end of the story. The Stoics didn't just tolerate hardship, they invited it. Seneca deliberately wore thin clothing in winter, slept on hard floors, fasted for days, not because he enjoyed suffering, but to remind himself, "I am stronger than my comforts." Modern men have forgotten this discipline. We numb ourselves with endless distractions, avoid difficult conversations, and call it self-care. But here's the truth: avoidance weakens you. Every time you dodge discomfort, you send a subconscious message: "I can't handle this," and that insecurity bleeds into everything from your posture to your voice to how you approach women. Now contrast that with the man who trains in discomfort like an athlete trains his body. Cold showers instead of snoozing the alarm, difficult conversations instead of passive aggression, solo travel instead of staying in the safety of routine. These aren't masochistic acts, they're rehearsals for resilience. When you willingly step into discomfort, you rewire your nervous system. What once terrified you, rejection, uncertainty, vulnerability, becomes familiar terrain. And that's when you start radiating a different energy. Women sense it immediately. This is a man who won't fold under pressure, who won't panic when life gets messy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's amor fati in action, the job rejection. It's redirecting you to something better. The breakup, it's making space for a deeper connection. The gym session that leaves you aching, it's forging discipline that spills into every area of your life. Most men miss this because they're too busy complaining about the obstacle instead of using it as a stepping stone. Here's the practical shift: stop asking, "How can I avoid this pain?" Start asking, "What does this pain make possible?" That's the Stoic reframe. When you embrace challenges as opportunities to prove your resilience, you stop fearing them, and that lack of fear is what makes you stand out. Women aren't looking for a man who's never been knocked down. They're drawn to the one who always gets back up, dusts himself off, and smiles like he knew it was coming. Epictetus, born into slavery, put it bluntly: difficulties show men what they are. In other words, your character isn't revealed in comfort, it's revealed under pressure. The man who runs from discomfort is the same man who hesitates to approach her, who panics when the conversation lulls, who takes rejection as a verdict on his worth. The man who loves fate, he's the one who walks into a room unshaken, who laughs at setbacks, who treats life's chaos as his playground. That's the kind of presence that doesn't just attract women, it captivates them. Because when you stop resisting life's storms and start dancing in the rain, you become unforgettable. There's a hidden power in simply being here, fully, unreservedly, without scanning the room for the next best thing or rehearsing your next line in your head. Women can sense when a man is truly present versus when he's just waiting for his turn to speak. This is the sixth Stoic mindset, mastering the art of undivided attention. Seneca once wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it." But here's the twist: he wasn't talking about adding years to your life. He meant that the person who wastes no moment, who gives each interaction his full focus, experiences time more richly. Think about the last conversation where someone's eyes glazed over as they checked their phone mid-sentence. Now imagine the opposite, a man who listens with his whole being, who isn't just hearing words but absorbing meaning. That's magnetic. Presence isn't passive, it's an active choice. Most men underestimate how rare it is to be fully engaged. In a world of endless distractions, the ability to lock in, to make someone feel like they're the only person in the room, sets you apart. It's not about grand gestures, it's about the micro moments. The way you lean in slightly when she speaks, the way you recall a detail she mentioned days later, the way you don't interrupt to one-up her story. Women don't just notice this, they're disarmed by it, because presence signals something deeper: respect. A man who isn't chasing validation elsewhere isn't just confident, he's offering a gift. Stoic mindfulness isn't about emptying your mind like some meditation cliché. It's about directing your attention with intention. Epictetus taught that our minds are like bowls of water. When turbulent, they reflect nothing clearly. But when still, they mirror reality exactly. That's the key. When you're mentally scattered worrying about impressions, strategizing your next move, you're not really there. And she knows it, but when you anchor yourself in the moment, when you let go of the need to perform, something shifts. Conversations flow effortlessly. Laughter comes naturally, connection deepens without force. Here's where modern dating gets it wrong. They teach men to hold frame as if it's a performance. But real presence isn't a technique, it's a state of being. Think of Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet journaled about the importance of focusing on the task at hand, whether it was reviewing battle plans or playing with his children. He understood that half-hearted attention insults both the giver and receiver. Women feel this instinctively. When you're distracted, you're telling her she's not worth your time. When you're present, you're showing her she is. The practical shift: practice monotasking. Next time you're in conversation, notice when your mind wanders to your dinner plans or that text you need to send. Gently pull it back, not with frustration, but with the discipline of a Stoic. Seneca called this the discipline of assent, the ability to choose where your attention goes. Start small. Put your phone away, not just face down, but out of sight. Listen to understand, not to respond. Notice the color of her eyes, the cadence of her voice, the spaces between her words. These subtle acts of attention compound. Over time, you won't just seem present, you'll become it. And here's the paradox: the less you try to impress, the more impressive you become. A man who's fully engaged isn't thinking about how he's being perceived. He's not calculating charm or rehearsing witticisms. He's simply there, open, curious, undefended. That kind of authenticity can't be faked. Women spot the difference between a man who's performing attention and one who's genuinely giving it. One leaves her feeling like a prop in his story. The other leaves her feeling seen. And in a world where so many people are screaming to be heard, being seen is the rarest form of attraction. There's a quiet revolution happening in how men approach attraction. One that has nothing to do with flashy cars or clever pickup lines and everything to do with character. The Stoics called it arete, excellence of soul, embodied through four timeless virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These aren't abstract ideals, they're practical tools that separate the truly magnetic man from the crowd of ego-driven showmen. Picture two guys at a bar. One dominates conversations, name drops, and subtly puts others down to elevate himself. The other listens intently, offers insights without pretension, and makes everyone around him feel valued. Who leaves a lasting impression? Who do women instinctively trust? The answer is obvious, yet most men miss the lesson. Virtue isn't just noble, it's attractive. Let's start with wisdom, not as dusty book knowledge, but as the ability to discern what matters. A wise man doesn't waste energy on trivial drama or petty competitions. He chooses his battles, speaks with intention, and navigates social dynamics with a calm clarity that feels rare. Imagine a first date where most guys would scramble to impress with exaggerated stories. The Stoic alternative: he shares genuine passions, maybe a book that changed his perspective or a project he's building without overselling. Wisdom here isn't about having all the answers, it's about being comfortable with nuance. Women sense this depth immediately. It's the difference between a man who performs intelligence and one who embodies curiosity. Courage, the second virtue, is often misunderstood. It's not about reckless bravado or picking fights. Real courage is the willingness to be vulnerable, to express interest without games, to walk away from toxicity without drama, to admit when you're wrong. Think about the last time you saw a man apologize sincerely or own an unpopular opinion without defensiveness. That's Stoic courage in action. In dating, it might look like this: she cancels plans last minute. The insecure guy blows up her phone or acts passive-aggressive. The virtuous man responds with calm honesty: I'm disappointed, but I respect your time. Let me know when you're free. No guilt trips, no hidden tests. That kind of emotional courage signals strength far louder than any flex. Just as Stoicism's third pillar is where most modern game advice fails spectacularly. The ego-driven man sees dating as a transaction. What can I get? The virtuous man asks, what can I contribute? Justice here isn't about courtroom fairness. It's about treating others as ends in themselves, not means to your gratification. Small acts reveal this: remembering her allergy when ordering food, giving the waiter respect, calling out a friend's sexist joke. Women notice these micro-behaviors because they telegraph your core values. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What's bad for the hive is bad for the bee." A man who uplifts rather than exploits doesn't just earn trust, he inspires admiration. Then there's temperance, the art of restraint. In a world of excess, the disciplined man stands apart. Temperance isn't deprivation, it's the mastery of desire. Consider how easily most men lose themselves, drowning in lust, drowning in bitterness after rejection, drowning in attention seeking on social media. The Stoic alternative: enjoy attraction without obsession, savor a drink without needing 10, celebrate connection without clinginess. This isn't about being a robot, it's about being governed rather than driven by your appetites. Women resonate with this balance because it signals safety, not the boring kind, but the kind that says, this man won't lose control. Now contrast this with the ego-driven approach. The guy who brags about conquests, who negs to undermine confidence, who treats dates like auditions for his personal fan club. These tactics might spark short-term interest, but they burn out fast. Why? Because ego is a mask for insecurity, and women, consciously or not, are exquisitely attuned to the difference between performance and authenticity. Virtue, on the other hand, compounds. Every act of wisdom, courage, justice, or temperance builds a reputation not as a nice guy, but as a man of substance. Here's the practical shift. Stop asking, how can I make her like me? Start asking, how can I act in alignment with my values today? The first question centers on her approval, the second centers on your integrity. That's the secret. When you lead with virtue, attraction isn't something you chase, it's something you attract. Not because you manipulated the outcome, but because you became the kind of man worth choosing. Epictetus put it bluntly: first, know who you are, then adorn yourself accordingly. The most magnetic men don't wear confidence like a costume, they build it virtue by virtue until it's bone deep. And that's when the world, and the women in it, takes notice. Desperation has a scent, and women can smell it from miles away. It's that clingy energy, the nervous laughter, the way a man's entire mood hinges on whether she texts back. Stoics cracked the code on this centuries ago with a mindset shift so simple yet transformative. Focus on your effort, not the outcome. This isn't about apathy or pretending you don't care. It's about recognizing that your control ends where your actions end. Everything beyond that, her response, her interest, even chemistry, isn't yours to command. And here's the paradox: the moment you release your grip on outcomes, you become infinitely more attractive. Picture two men approaching the same woman. The first is hyper-aware of every micro-expression, adjusting his behavior like a puppeteer pulling his own strings. The second is relaxed, engaged, wholly present, not because he's guaranteed success, but because he's detached from it. Who commands the room? Who seems like he has options? Detachment signals abundance, not because you're juggling partners, but because your self-worth isn't tied to any single interaction. Women read this subconsciously. It's the difference between needing her approval and inviting her into your world. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control, a cornerstone of their philosophy. Epictetus framed it as two lists: what's up to us, our judgments, desires, actions, and what isn't, reputation, outcomes, others' choices. The moment you internalize this, dating transforms. Instead of obsessing over whether she'll say yes, you focus on crafting a genuine invitation. Instead of agonizing over ghosting, you reflect: did I show up as my best self? That shift alone drains desperation from your veins. You stop seeing women as prizes to win and start seeing connections as gardens to tend. Some will bloom, others won't. But the gardener's worth isn't defined by every seed. Practical technique: before any social interaction, rehearse this Stoic mantra: I control my effort, not the result. Say it until it sinks into your bones. Then, pay attention to the subtle ways outcome dependence leaks into your behavior. Do you laugh louder at her jokes than you feel? Nod too eagerly, over-apologize. These are tells. The antidote is process-oriented goals. Instead of get her number, aim for have a fun, authentic conversation. Instead of make her like me, try learn one interesting thing about her. These reframes transfer your focus to what you can actually influence: your presence, your curiosity, your energy. Marcus Aurelius journaled this reminder: you're disturbed not by things, but by your judgments about them. That's the key. Rejection only stings if you attach your worth to it. But when you view dating as a series of experiments rather than verdicts, setbacks lose their power. Think of a scientist. If an experiment fails, he doesn't crumble, he adjusts variables. Adopt that mindset. Every no is data, not doom. Every awkward pause is feedback, not failure. Over time, this Stoic detachment becomes your superpower. You'll approach women with a calm confidence that whispers, I'm here because I choose to be, not because I need to be, and that's irresistible. Words are currency, not in how many you spend, but in how much they're worth. The ninth Stoic mindset cuts through the noise of modern dating. Communicate with clarity and intent. This isn't about memorizing scripts or rehearsing punchlines. It's about stripping away the fluff, the posturing, the nervous chatter that dilutes your message. Women aren't won over by men who talk more. They're drawn to those who speak with precision, every word carrying weight, every silence brimming with confidence. Marcus Aurelius's meditations weren't filled with rambling musings. They were razor-sharp reflections, each sentence a chisel strike on marble. That's the power of brevity. When you say what you mean and mean what you say, you stand out in a world drowning in empty words. Take his famous line: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, no caveats, no qualifications, just truth distilled. Now imagine applying that to attraction. Instead of, hey, I was wondering if maybe you'd like to, grab coffee sometime. You land with, let's get coffee Thursday. You pick the spot. The difference isn't arrogance, it's clarity. One reeks of hesitation, the other radiates certainty. Women don't need you to tiptoe around your intentions. They respect a man who knows what he wants and isn't afraid to voice it. But clarity isn't just about cutting filler words. It's about emotional honesty, another Stoic superpower. Most men fall into two traps: hiding behind humor or burying their interest in vague, safe banter. The Stoic alternative: directness without aggression. If you're intrigued by her, say so. If a boundary's crossed, name it. Epictetus warned. If you've told secrets to your slave, you've made him your master. Translation: when you're unclear, you hand over power. A woman would rather hear, "I enjoy your company, let's do this again," than suffer through lukewarm mixed signals. Here's where Stoicism dismantles pickup artist dogma. Tactics like negging or canned lines are just manipulation in disguise, a lack of clarity masked as game. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your words are deceptive, your character follows. Contrast that with the man who speaks plainly, "I had a great time tonight." No games, no subtext, just authenticity. That kind of transparency builds trust, and trust is the bedrock of attraction. Practical shift: audit your conversations. Notice how often you hedge with kind of, sort of, or maybe. Replace them with definitive language. Instead of "I'm kinda into fitness," say, "I train 5 days a week, it's my sanctuary." Watch how your confidence amplifies when your words stop apologizing for themselves. And when it's time to express interest, don't camouflage it in jokes or ambiguity. "I like you." Let's explore that. Simple, clean, unmistakable. The Stoics called this parrhesia, fearless speech. Not bluster, but the courage to let your words align with your truth. In a world of ghosting, breadcrumbing, and vague booking, the man who communicates with clarity isn't just refreshing. He's magnetic, because when you remove the guesswork, you give her the rarest gift of all, the freedom to choose, unclouded by doubt. And that's how connections deepen, one honest word at a time. Perfection is a mask, and everyone can see the straps. The 10th Stoic mindset flips society's script on flaws. Own them without apology or performance. This isn't about fishing for reassurance or weaponizing vulnerability. It's about standing in your whole truth, strengths and cracks alike, with the unshakable calm of a man who knows his worth isn't negotiable. Women spot the difference instantly between a guy who hides behind bravado and one who says, "I messed up, here's what I learned," with zero shame. That kind of radical self-acceptance. It's catnip, because confidence isn't the absence of imperfections. It's the refusal to let them define you. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journals about his own shortcomings, his temper, his distractions, his moments of weakness. Not to wallow, but to confront. "You're better than this," he'd remind himself. That's the Stoic art of self-acceptance, acknowledging flaws without letting them off the hook. Think of two men at a dinner date. One trips over his words and laughs it off. "Guess I'm rusty at this, thanks for enduring my awkwardness." The other stiffens, forces a joke, and spends the rest of the night overcompensating. Who's more relatable? Who's more human? Women don't want polished statues. They crave partners who are real. But here's where most men veer off course. Some armor up, pretending they've got it all figured out, a facade that screams insecurity. Others overshare, turning flaws into pity parties. "I'm just terrible at relationships, you'll see." Stoicism rejects both extremes. Instead, it teaches owning imperfections while working on them. Epictetus put it bluntly, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish." That means admitting when you're wrong, laughing at your quirks, and refusing to let shame hijack your growth. Practical shift: start a flaw inventory, not to beat yourself up, but to disarm your ego. Journal prompt straight from the Stoics. What's one habit I've been avoiding fixing? Where do I pretend to be stronger than I am? When did I last laugh at myself? Write with brutal honesty, then add a second column. How could this flaw serve me if I embraced it? Maybe your stubbornness is also perseverance. Maybe your bluntness is rare authenticity. The goal isn't to excuse weaknesses, but to integrate them so they stop being landmines and start being landmarks. Now, contrast this with the guy who's never made a mistake in his life, according to him. His defensiveness is exhausting. Every critique is a threat. Every misstep is someone else's fault. Women sense this fragility beneath the bravado, but the man who says, "I used to suck at listening, still working on it," radiates something else entirely: security. That's the magnetism of self-possession. You're not perfect, and you're not pleading for forgiveness. You're just a work in progress, aware, accountable, and utterly at peace with the process. Seneca wrote, "A man's as wretched as he's convinced he is." Translation: suffering comes from resistance, not flaws themselves. The moment you stop hiding your rough edges, they lose their power to embarrass you. And that's when the magic happens. Women lean closer, conversations deepen, connection sparks, not because you're flawless, but because you're free. Free from posturing, free from pretense, free to engage as you are. That's the ultimate Stoic flex, letting your whole self take up space unapologetically. So next time you catch yourself faking competence or dodging accountability, pause. Ask, am I hiding or healing? Then channel Epictetus again. First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. Own the gap between where you are and where you want to be, not as a wound but as a roadmap. Because the man who's comfortable in his own skin, flaws and all, isn't just magnetic to women, he's unstoppable. Growth isn't optional for the Stoic, it's oxygen. The 11th mindset shifts the focus from chasing validation to chasing evolution, because here's the truth women instinctively grasp: a man committed to bettering himself is a man worth investing in. This isn't about performative self-help or collecting certifications like trophies. Real growth is quieter, deeper, the daily grind of refining your character, expanding your mind, and facing your blind spots without flinching. Picture two men on a date. One spends the evening reciting his resume, name-dropping promotions, as if his worth is etched in job titles. The other speaks with quiet intensity about the book that changed his perspective last month, the skill he's painstakingly honing, the way failure reshaped him. Who leaves her curious? Who lingers in her thoughts long after the check arrives? Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the known world, began each morning with a simple ritual, reminding himself he'd encounter lazy, dishonest, arrogant people that day, and that none of it excused him from staying virtuous. That's the Stoic growth mindset in action. Not grand declarations, but daily reckonings. Your version might look like 5 minutes of journaling before breakfast, asking, where did I cut corners yesterday? Where can I push further today? These small, consistent acts compound. Over time, they transform you into someone who doesn't just talk about change, but embodies it. Women notice this trajectory. They're drawn to the man who's visibly becoming, not because he's perfect, but because he's progressing. Practical shift. Adopt the Stoics' evening review. Before bed, reflect on 3 questions. What did I do well today? Where did I fall short? What's one step I'll take tomorrow? Not to self-flagellate, but to course-correct. Epictetus, the philosopher born into slavery, framed it bluntly. Progress isn't impossible, neglecting progress is. Most men mistake motion for growth, busyness for betterment. The Stoic knows better. Reading 1 page of philosophy with full attention trumps skimming 10 while distracted. One honest conversation about your fears outweighs a year of small talk. Depth over volume. Now contrast this with the guy who's been meaning to hit the gym, learn Italian, or start meditation for years. His inertia is palpable. Women don't expect you to have it all figured out, but they respect the man actively figuring it out. Think of Seneca's letters, where he confessed his own struggles with temper, greed, distraction. His vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was proof he was doing the work. That's magnetic. When you speak passionately about the podcast that challenged your assumptions, the cold shower habit you're mastering, or the way you're rewiring your reactions, you're not just sharing hobbies. You're demonstrating a core truth. You're a man who takes himself seriously. Here's the subtle power of this mindset. It makes you interesting over time. Not through manufactured mystery, but through genuine depth. The guy who's always learning, always questioning, always refining. He's a conversation that never gets stale. Women crave this, not because they're your audience, but because growth is contagious. It pulls people into your orbit, not with flashy promises, but with the quiet gravity of a man who's always rising. So start small, choose one skill, one virtue, one weak point, and attack it with discipline. Maybe it's listening more intently, maybe it's waking without snoozing. Maybe it's sitting with discomfort instead of numbing it. Track your progress like a Stoic scientist, without ego, without drama, because the man who's constantly evolving doesn't just attract women. He inspires them, and that's a distinction worth chasing. Victimhood is a trap, one the Stoics refuse to step into. Consider Epictetus, born into slavery, his leg deliberately broken by his master. He could have spent his life raging against the injustice, but instead he famously said, "What concerns me is not that I'm a slave, but whether I'm a good one." That's the 12th mindset, rejecting the lure of victimhood and embracing radical responsibility. Women aren't turned off by struggle. They're repelled by men who wear their scars like crowns, who blame the world for their stagnant lives. But when a man looks adversity in the eye and says, "This is my battlefield," that's magnetic. History's most admired figures, from Nelson Mandela to Frederick Douglass, didn't deny their suffering. They refused to let it define them. Take Marcus Aurelius again, ruling Rome during plague and war. His journals reveal zero self-pity, only relentless focus on what he could control, his character, his decisions, his next move. Contrast that with the guy who's always the nice guy finishing last, who rants about women choosing jerks, who sees himself as perpetually wrong. That energy is repellent, not because his pain isn't real, but because it's stagnant. Stoicism teaches a different path. Acknowledge the wound, then ask, "What now?" A man who takes ownership of his life, even the ugly parts, commands respect, because responsibility isn't just duty, it's power. Here's the practical shift. Next time you catch yourself complaining about dating, your job, your past, pause. Ask, what's my agency here? Maybe you can't change the dating pool, but you can sharpen your social skills. Maybe you can't rewrite your childhood, but you can choose how it shapes your present. This isn't about denying pain, it's about refusing to kneel to it. Women spot the difference immediately. The victim whines, "No one gives me a chance." The Stoic acts, "I'll become someone impossible to ignore." Seneca, exiled to a barren island, didn't wallow. He wrote letters from a Stoic, some of history's greatest wisdom. That's the alchemy of responsibility, transforming poison into medicine. Your struggles, they're the raw material for your strength, your heartbreaks. They're lessons in resilience. The man who owns his story, every scar and stumble, doesn't just attract women. He earns their awe because adversity doesn't diminish him, it reveals him. And that's a man worth remembering. Pressure reveals more about a man than any polished first impression ever could. Here's the 13th Stoic mindset, mastering the pause, that split second between provocation and response where true character is forged. Women don't just notice how you handle stress, they test it, often subconsciously. A flirtatious comment about an ex, an unexpected silences, a last-minute change of plans, these aren't accidents. They're litmus tests for your emotional resilience. The man who falters, who lashes out or crumbles under tension, broadcasts insecurity, but the one who meets chaos with unshakable calm. He doesn't just pass the test, he redefines it. Think of Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon, knowing his decision meant civil war. Historians note his famous calm as he uttered, "The die is cast." That's Stoic composure in action, not the absence of stakes, but the presence of clarity amidst them. Now, translate that to modern dating. She playfully challenges your opinion. The insecure guy gets defensive, scrambling to prove himself. The Stoic, he leans back, smiles, and says, "Interesting take, tell me why you think that." No agitation, no ego bruises, just curiosity. That's leadership energy, and leadership, contrary to popular belief, isn't about dominance, it's about steadiness when others would waver. The Stoic pause isn't passive, it's strategic. Epictetus described it as the discipline of assent, the practice of withholding judgment until you've interrogated your initial reaction. Let's break this down with a high-pressure scenario. You're on a date, and she casually mentions she's still friends with her ex. Your stomach tightens. The untrained mind races. Is she comparing me? Does she still have feelings? Here's where most men implode, either with jealous probing or forced indifference. The Stoic alternative: breathe, let the silence linger for a beat. Then, friendship after romance takes maturity. What you learn from that: no accusation, no insecurity, just a pivot toward depth. That shift alone separates boys from men. Now contrast this with the guy who panics under pressure. His voice cracks during disagreements. He overthinks every text, crafting novels where a sentence would suffice. He mistakes intensity for passion, conflating emotional outbursts with authenticity. Women spot this fragility instantly. Why? Because life is full of curveballs, and if a man can't handle a delayed reply without spiraling, how will he handle real adversity? Practical training: start small. Next time someone cuts you off in traffic, resist the middle finger. Instead, laugh. Hope they're having a better day than that move suggests. That's emotional weightlifting. Then, level up. Role-play high-stress dating scenarios with a friend. Have them throw curveballs. Your ex just walked in. I don't usually date guys like you. You're quieter than I expected. Practice responding with deliberate calm, not indifference but composed engagement. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." That strength isn't brute force, it's the ability to hold space for discomfort without flinching. Here's the secret women won't always articulate. They're not looking for a man who never feels pressure. They're drawn to the one who wears it like a second skin, who transforms tension into presence. Because when you master the pause, you broadcast something rare: I'm not easily shaken. And in a world of emotionally volatile men, that's not just attractive, it's unforgettable. Generosity with strings attached is just manipulation in disguise, and women have a sixth sense for detecting the difference. The 14th Stoic mindset strips away the hidden agendas: give freely or not at all. Seneca, the wealthy philosopher who donated much of his fortune, wrote, "Benefits are only counted if they're given with an open hand and a closed mouth." That's the essence. Stoic generosity isn't about keeping score or banking goodwill. It's about recognizing that the act itself is the reward. Picture two men at a bar. One buys rounds loudly, reminding everyone of his generosity, while the other quietly covers a stranger's tab and walks away. Who commands respect? Who leaves an imprint? Authentic giving radiates not because it seeks attention, but because it transcends transaction. This mindset runs deeper than grand gestures. It's in the micro choices: listening without waiting for your turn to speak, offering help without advertising it, celebrating her wins without jealousy. Women notice these quiet acts of kindness because they reveal character. The guy who accidentally mentions the concert tickets he bought or the favors he's done. His generosity is a loan shark's expecting interest. The Stoic alternative: give because it aligns with your values, then release it. No mental ledgers, no subtle guilt trips. Seneca warned, "He who gives quickly gives twice." Translation: hesitation betrays calculation. But here's the twist: Stoic generosity isn't passive, it's discerning. Marcus Aurelius cautioned against indiscriminate giving, stressing that true kindness requires wisdom. Blindly accommodating others isn't virtue, it's weakness. Imagine a date where she cancels last minute for the third time. The needy guy rearranges his schedule again, secretly resenting her. The Stoic, he's happy to reschedule once, but then sets a boundary. "I value my time, let's plan when you're sure." That's generosity with backbone. Women respect men who give from abundance, not depletion. Practical shift, audit your intentions. Next time you're tempted to do something nice, ask, would I still do this if no one ever found out? If the answer's no, pause, and when you do give, whether it's time, attention, or resources, practice mental relinquishment. Picture dropping a stone into a lake. Once it leaves your hand, it's gone. No fishing for praise, no replaying your good deeds, just pure, unadulterated giving. The irony, when you stop treating generosity as currency, it becomes priceless. Women aren't drawn to men who trade kindness. They're drawn to those who embody it, because the man who gives without expectation isn't just generous, he's free. And freedom, as the Stoics knew, is the ultimate magnetism. Time is the one currency you can never earn back, and nothing sharpens your priorities like remembering that. The 15th Stoic mindset, memento mori, remember you must die, isn't about morbid fixation. It's about radical clarity. Women don't just notice how you spend your time, they judge whether you respect theirs. The man who lingers in dead-end conversations, who tolerates disrespect under the guise of patience, who hesitates to chase what he truly wants, he's not being polite. He's being wasteful. Stoicism reframes time as your most sacred resource and boundaries as the guardians of it. Picture Marcus Aurelius ruling an empire while war and plague ravaged Rome. His journals are punctuated with reminders of life's brevity. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say. That urgency wasn't panic, it was precision. Contrast that with a guy who lets dates drag on out of obligation, who responds to lukewarm interest with endless texts, who stays in situations that drain him because he's afraid to offend. Women sense this lack of resolve. It's not attractive to be accommodating, it's attractive to be intentional. When you treat time as finite, every yes becomes meaningful, and every no becomes an act of self-respect. But here's where most men stumble. They confuse boundaries with rudeness. Stoic boundaries aren't walls, they're gates clearly marked, unapologetically maintained. Imagine a woman cancels last minute with a vague excuse. The needy guy replies, "No worries, just let me know when you're free." The Stoic, "I set aside time for this." If your schedule's unpredictable, let's plan when things stabilize. No anger, no guilt, just a quiet declaration that your time has value. That kind of clarity doesn't push women away, it filters for those worth keeping. Practical shift, audit your calendar like a Stoic accountant. Every commitment gets one question. If this were my last month, would I still do this? Not as a license for selfishness, but as a litmus test for authenticity. Stop killing time, start honoring it. Decline invites politely but firmly. Leave conversations that go nowhere. Walk away from energy vampires. Women don't fall for men who chase endlessly. They're drawn to those who choose wisely. Because when you respect your own time, you teach others to respect it too. Seneca, who wrote on the shortness of life, put it bluntly, "You act like mortals in all you fear, and like immortals in all you desire." The antidote. Live with death over your shoulder, not as a shadow, but as a compass. Let it strip away trivial pursuits and half-hearted connections. The man who knows his days are numbered doesn't play games. He doesn't settle, he radiates a quiet intensity that says, "I'm here, fully are you?" And that's the most magnetic question of all. Silence can be your most powerful social tool when wielded with Stoic intention. Mindset 16 cuts through the noise of modern communication. Avoid gossip and negativity not as a moral rule, but as a strategic edge. Women don't just notice what you say, they notice what you don't engage with. The man who refrains from tearing others down, who doesn't bond over shared complaints, who keeps his conversations free of petty drama, he stands out like an oasis in a desert of negativity. Think of Marcus Aurelius, who wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That's the Stoic twist. Silence isn't passivity, it's a declaration of your standards. Contrast two men at a social gathering. One leans in eagerly when the conversation turns to office politics or a mutual friend's misfortunes. The other listens politely, then shifts the topic to ideas, adventures, or genuine curiosity. Who leaves the deeper impression? Who seems like a safe harbor in life's storms? Gossip might feel like social glue in the moment, but it's corrosive over time. Women instinctively trust men who aren't easily drawn into negativity because that restraint signals something rare: emotional security. A man who doesn't need to belittle others to elevate himself is a man who's already standing on solid ground. The Stoics called this disciplina oris, discipline of speech. Epictetus taught that words are like coins. Their value depends on how sparingly you spend them. Casual negativity, complaining about traffic, mocking someone's outfit, rehashing grievances might seem harmless, but each instance chips away at your presence. Women aren't attracted to men who traffic in snark. They're drawn to those who elevate the room. Picture a date where she tests the waters with a harmless jab at her ex. The insecure guy jumps in, eager to prove allegiance. The Stoic, he nods, then asks, "What did that relationship teach you?" That pivot doesn't just deflect gossip, it reveals depth. Practical shift: audit your conversations for 3 days. Note every time you're tempted to vent, judge, or indulge in schadenfreude. Then apply the Stoic filter. Is this necessary? Is it kind? Does it improve the situation? Most gossip fails all three. Replace it with something unexpected: a compliment about the absent party, a change of subject to shared interests, or simply comfortable silence. Seneca warned, speech is the index of the mind. When your words are clean, your character shines through. The irony: avoiding negativity doesn't make you bland, it makes you intriguing. Women lean closer to the man who isn't easily baited, who doesn't need the cheap thrill of tearing others down. Because in a world full of noise, the man who chooses his words like precious stones becomes impossible to ignore. And that's a silence worth mastering. Solitude isn't loneliness, it's the ultimate test of self-possession. The 17th Stoic mindset reveals a counterintuitive truth: the more comfortable you are alone, the more magnetic you become in company. Women don't just notice who you are around others, they sense who you are when no one's watching. A man who needs constant distraction, who fills every silence with noise, who can't sit with his own thoughts. That's neediness in its rawest form. But the man who enjoys his own company, who finds richness in quiet moments, who doesn't rely on external validation to feel alive. That's confidence distilled. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned exile into enlightenment, put it bluntly: if you're ever tempted to look for outside approval, realize you've lost your way. Think of two men on a first date. One nervously fills every pause with chatter, terrified of silence. The other lets conversations breathe, comfortable in the stillness, as if he's already at home within himself. Who commands the room? Who leaves her wondering what else lies beneath the surface? Solitude, when embraced, becomes a forge for depth. The Stoics didn't avoid it, they sought it. Marcus Aurelius spent years on military campaigns, turning his tent into a sanctuary for reflection. His journals weren't written for applause, they were dialogues with his soul. That's the allure of a man who doesn't just tolerate solitude but cultivates it. He's not desperate for attention because he's already complete. Practical shift. Start small. Dedicate 20 minutes a day to doing nothing but thinking. No phone, no distractions, just you and your mind. At first, it'll feel uncomfortable. You'll itch to check notifications, to drown the silence. That's the point. Sit with the discomfort until it becomes familiarity. Then level up, take yourself to dinner. Not at a fast food counter where you can hide behind your phone, but at a proper table. Order what you love, savor it. Notice the stares from people who can't fathom such self-sufficiency, then notice how little you care. Here's where most men miss the mark. They equate solitude with isolation, but Stoic solitude is active. It's where you untangle your thoughts, confront your fears, and refine your values. Seneca wrote letters to his friend Lucilius from self-imposed retreats. not to escape the world, but to engage with it more wisely. That's the paradox. The man who regularly withdraws returns sharper, more grounded, more interesting. Women sense this, a guy who's always surrounded by an entourage, predictable, the one who disappears occasionally to read, hike, or create, mysterious. Now contrast this with the guy who panics when left alone. His texts come in rapid-fire bursts. His social media is a constant performance. He's a mirror reflecting whatever crowd he's in. Women might flirt with him, but they'll rarely respect him, because a man who can't sit with himself is a man who'll cling to anyone who fills the void. The Stoic alternative: become your own best company, explore museums solo, travel without an itinerary, journal not for an audience but for clarity. Over time, you'll radiate something rare, the unshakable calm of a man who chooses companionship but doesn't need it. Epictetus, born into slavery, had every reason to resent solitude. Instead, he called it the school of self-mastery. That's the secret. When you stop fearing silence, you stop fearing rejection. When you're at peace alone, you engage with others from abundance, not lack. And that's when women lean in, not because you're chasing their attention, but because you've become someone worth chasing. Life's too short to take yourself seriously, and the Stoics knew it. The 18th mindset flips the script on modern masculinity. Laugh at yourself often, but never at others' expense. This isn't about punching down or cheap self-loathing. It's about the rare ability to find humor in your own flaws, to wear your humanity like a badge of honor rather than a hidden wound. Women don't just tolerate this quality, they're disarmed by it. Think of the guy who trips on a date and quips, "Well, that's one way to make an entrance," versus the one who stiffens with embarrassment, scrambling to salvage his dignity. Who's more relatable? Who's more alive? Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, constantly reminded himself of life's absurdity. In his journals, he'd muse about how even emperors end up as a little dust and ashes, not with gloom but with a wink. That's Stoic humor in action, perspective so sharp it cuts through pretense. Imagine a modern equivalent. You're caught in a downpour on the way to meet her. The insecure guy shows up flustered, apologizing for his soaked clothes. The Stoic, he shakes off his jacket and deadpans. "Turns out I'm not waterproof." Good to know, that lightness doesn't undermine confidence, it proves it, because only a man secure in his worth can turn mishaps into punchlines. Here's where most men miss the mark. Some armor up, treating every misstep as a threat to their image. Others overcorrect, mocking themselves excessively to fish for reassurance, the Stoic balance. Playful self-awareness without self-flagellation. Epictetus, the philosopher who laughed through poverty and disability, taught that humor is a dagger of the mind. It disarms life's sharpest blows. When you can chuckle at your own awkwardness, you neutralize its power. Women sense this instantly. A man who laughs at his flaws isn't admitting weakness, he's demonstrating immunity to shame. Practical shift: keep a fail log. Jot down your blunders, the fumbled handshake, the burnt dinner, the autocorrect disaster, and reframe them as comedy material. Not to dwell on failure, but to rob it of its sting. Seneca wrote letters filled with witty observations about his own vanity and missteps. He didn't deny his imperfections, he turned them into art. That's the alchemy. When you stop fearing embarrassment, you start radiating ease. Now contrast this with the guy who crumbles at the slightest social misstep. His tension is palpable, every joke rehearsed, every silence panicked. Women aren't drawn to perfection, they're drawn to presence, and nothing kills presence faster than the fear of looking foolish. The Stoic alternative: embrace the role of the joyful fool. Trip, bow dramatically, forget her friend's name. I promise I'll remember by our 50th anniversary. This isn't just humor, it's social jiu-jitsu, using life's hiccups to showcase your unshakability. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing." Sometimes you'll get thrown. The question isn't whether you'll fall, it's whether you'll land laughing. Because the man who finds joy in the stumble isn't just fun to be around, he's teaching everyone nearby how to lighten up. And that's a lesson women never tire of learning. A man who waits for life to happen to him is a man who'll always be one step behind. Mindset 19 flips the script: act, don't react. This isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about choosing your response so deliberately that you steer situations rather than being swept by them. Women don't just notice this quality, they're drawn to it like a compass to north. Think of two men facing the same rejection. One spirals, was it something I said? Should I text her again? While the other nods, smiles, and says, you're lost. Enjoy your night. Neither man is immune to disappointment, but only one owns his next move. That's the difference between reacting and responding, and it's the difference between boyish insecurity and masculine command. The Stoics called this prohersis, the power to choose your attitude in any circumstance. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned adversity into art, framed it like this: it's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Translation: rejection only stings if you interpret it as a verdict on your worth. Dating is littered with moments that test this. She ghosts after a great date. The reactive man bombards her with messages, seeking closure he'll never get. The proactive one, he shrugs and thinks, her loss, then approaches the next woman with the same calm enthusiasm. That lack of emotional whiplash isn't just attractive, it's a silent announcement. I'm not governed by your choices. Here's where most men get trapped. They mistake reaction for authenticity, as if flying off the handle at a slight proves they're real. Stoicism offers a wiser path. Imagine a date where she casually mentions she's seeing other people. The reactive guy tenses, his voice tightening as he coolly probes for details. The Stoic, he leans back, unbothered. Dating's a numbers game, smart to explore options. How's that going for you? No jealousy, no performative indifference, just curiosity from a man who knows his value isn't threatened by competition. Women sense this security instantly. It's not about pretending you don't care, it's about demonstrating you don't need to. Practical shift, create a reaction gap. Next time something knocks you off balance, a flaky text, a last-minute cancellation, pause. Breathe, ask, what's the most constructive way to own this moment? Then act from that space. Marcus Aurelius scribbled reminders to himself. You have power over your mind, not outside events. That's the core. Proactive men don't control outcomes, they control their relationship to outcomes. Now, contrast this with the guy who's a puppet to his emotions. One bad date and he's ranting about women these days. A delayed reply and he's rewriting his profile in desperation. That volatility is exhausting. Women aren't looking for a robot, they're drawn to the man who feels deeply but decides deliberately. When you act instead of react, you're not just navigating dating more smoothly, you're proving you're the kind of man who navigates life with the same steady hands. And that's a man worth following. Energy isn't infinite, and the Stoics knew that protecting yours isn't selfish, it's strategic. Mindset 20 is about becoming a gatekeeper of your attention, your time, and your emotional reserves. Women don't just observe how you engage with the world, they notice what you allow to engage with you. A man who lets every minor slight, every draining conversation, every toxic dynamic chip away at him. That's neediness disguised as patience, but the man who walks away from what doesn't serve him, that's self-respect in motion. Think of Seneca turning down invitations from Nero's court, knowing the cost of proximity to corruption. He didn't call it rejection, he called it preservation. Here's where most men go wrong. They mistake tolerance for strength. They endure toxic friendships, one-sided relationships, or exhausting social rituals because they fear being seen as rude or missing out. Stoicism flips this script. Discernment isn't about arrogance, it's about recognizing that your energy is currency. Spend it recklessly and you'll go bankrupt. Invest it wisely and you compound your presence. Picture two men at a party. One gets drawn into a passive-aggressive debate and leaves frustrated. The other excuses himself with a smile. "You guys enjoy this. I'm going to catch up with someone over here." Who commands more respect? Who seems like he's got better places to be? Women sense this selectivity instantly. It signals you're not desperate for approval. You're curating your life. Practical shift. Start auditing your interactions like a Stoic accountant. After every conversation, ask, did this exchange give me energy or drain it? Not every interaction will be fireworks, but chronic drains should raise alarms. Maybe it's the friend who only reaches out to vent, the date who monopolizes conversations, or the coworker who thrives on drama. The Stoic response isn't dramatic, it's decisive. Gradually distance yourself, redirect conversations, set boundaries with kindness but firmness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." That's the mantra for energy protection. Not every battle deserves your presence. Now contrast this with the guy who can't say no. He overcommits to avoid disappointing people. He tolerates disrespect because he's afraid of conflict. He's so busy being available that he forgets to be alive. Women aren't attracted to men who spread themselves thin. They're drawn to those who know their worth isn't negotiable. Think of Epictetus, who taught that freedom comes from not being in awe of other people's opinions. When you stop letting others dictate your emotional weather, you radiate a rare kind of calm, the kind that says, "I choose where I belong," the ultimate test. Silence. Notice who reaches out when you stop initiating. Pay attention to which relationships wither without your constant effort. Those aren't losses, they're upgrades. Because the man who protects his energy isn't just avoiding drains, he's making space for what truly fuels him. And that's when women lean in closer, not because you chased them, but because they recognize a man who knows his own value. Indecision is a silent killer of attraction, not because it's morally wrong, but because it whispers insecurity. The 21st Stoic mindset cuts through this. Be decisive, not flawless. Women aren't drawn to men who always make the perfect choice. They're drawn to those who make clear choices. Think of Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who stood unshaken against Caesar's rise. His allies wavered, calculating risks and rewards. Cato, he chose his stance and held it with such conviction that even his enemies respected him. That's the magnetism of decisiveness. It's not about being right, it's about being resolved. Modern dating is littered with opportunities to waffle. Where to eat? Anywhere's fine. When to call? I don't want to seem too eager. These micro-hesitations seem harmless, but they're death by 1,000 cuts to your presence. Contrast that with the guy who says, "Let's try the new Italian place. I heard their pasta is incredible," or texts the next morning, "Last night was fun. Let's do it again Thursday." No hemming, no hawing, just calm certainty. Women don't follow men who second-guess themselves. They're drawn to those who lead with quiet authority. Here's the Stoic secret. Decisiveness isn't impulsivity. It's the result of a disciplined mind. Epictetus taught that hesitation is often a mask for fear of rejection, of imperfection, of commitment. The antidote, premeditatio malorum, the practice of envisioning worst-case scenarios before they happen. Imagine you're choosing between two dates, a casual coffee meetup or a bold evening activity. The indecisive man obsesses over which she'll prefer. The Stoic, he considers both, picks one and owns it. If she declines, next time then. No drama, no self-doubt, just forward motion. That resilience is irresistible because it signals a deeper truth. You're not easily derailed. Cato's legacy wasn't built on never failing, it was built on never flinching. When his political campaigns failed, he didn't pivot to appease the crowd. When his marriage crumbled, he didn't seek public sympathy. He made choices, bore their consequences, and remained steadfast. That's the lesson for modern men. Decisiveness isn't about controlling outcomes. It's about controlling your response to outcomes. A woman would rather hear, "I chose wrong, let's fix it," than watch you paralyzed by the illusion of perfect choices. Practical shift: start small. Next time you're tempted to defer a decision, what to order, which movie to watch, whether to approach her, stop. Set a 2-second rule: choose, then act. No takebacks. Over time, this trains the muscle of resolve. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't wait for Plato's Republic. Be content if even the smallest thing goes well." Decisiveness is that smallest thing, the daily proof that you trust yourself. And when a man trusts himself, others can't help but trust him too. The irony. Indecisive men think they're playing it safe, but they're actually eroding their appeal. Every "I don't know" dilutes your presence. Every "you pick" surrenders your agency. Stoicism reframes this. Life will challenge your choices anyway, so why not make them boldly? When you stand firm in your decisions, you're not just choosing a restaurant or a date plan. You're demonstrating a way of being, one that says, "I engage with life on my terms," and that's the kind of man women remember. What if every obstacle wasn't a roadblock but a secret shortcut? The Stoics called this amor fati, loving fate, but the 20-second mindset boils it down to something even more powerful: seeing barriers as invitations to level up. Women don't just admire men who handle adversity, they're magnetized by those who transform it into fuel. Picture two guys facing the same rejection. One spirals into self-doubt while the other walks away with a notebook, jotting down, "Lesson, open with stories, not interviews." That shift from victim to student doesn't just build resilience, it radiates a quiet confidence that says, "I can't lose because I always learn." Rejection stings because we frame it wrong. The Stoics didn't see failure as the opposite of success. They saw it as tuition. Take Marcus Aurelius, who turned sleepless nights on battlefields into philosophical reflections. His journals don't complain about hardship, they dissect it for wisdom. Now apply that to dating. A woman ghosts after a great conversation. The average guy overthinks every word he said. The Stoic, he reviews the interaction with clinical curiosity. Was I too agreeable? Did I lead the interaction or wait for her to entertain me? This isn't self-criticism, it's strategic recalibration. And here's the magic: when you treat obstacles as feedback loops, you stop fearing them. That absence of fear is what women read as unshakable. History's most magnetic men didn't dodge challenges, they hacked them. Consider Thomas Edison, who reframed 10,000 failed experiments as finding 10,000 ways that don't work. Now transpose that to attraction. A first date fizzles. Most men blame chemistry or luck. The Stoic asks, "What variables can I control next time?" Maybe it's choosing a more engaging venue, or listening more intently, or simply relaxing into his own skin. Obstacles become laboratories, each one revealing another layer of mastery. Women sense this experimental mindset. It's the difference between "why does this keep happening to me?" and "what's this trying to teach me?" One question keeps you stuck, the other propels you forward, and that momentum is irresistible. Practical shift. Keep an obstacle ledger. Every time something goes sideways, a flaky reply, an awkward silence, a mismatch, record 3 things: what happened, what you learned, and one tiny action to test next time. Over weeks, patterns emerge. Maybe you're coming on too strong early, or not leading the interaction enough, or defaulting to safe topics. The ledger isn't for self-judgment, it's for progress. Epictetus, who turned slavery into a masterclass on freedom, put it best: difficulties show men what they are. Every obstacle is a mirror, reflecting where you're still attached to outcomes, where you're playing not to lose instead of playing to grow. Here's what women don't tell you: they're watching how you handle no. The guy who crumbles at rejection reveals he's been faking his confidence. The one who nods, smiles, and recalibrates. He signals something rare: I don't need this to work out, I just need to keep improving. That's the alchemy. When you stop seeing obstacles as stop signs and start treating them as stepping stones, you don't just become more resilient, you become unfilterably magnetic. Because the man who can't be knocked off course isn't just attractive, he's unforgettable. Gratitude isn't just a polite habit, it's a silent superpower that reshapes how you move through the world. The 23rd Stoic mindset, daily gratitude, isn't about forced positivity or cliché thankfulness. It's about training your mind to spot abundance where others see lack, and that shift from scarcity to appreciation changes everything about your presence. Think of the last time you met someone who genuinely marveled at small joys, the perfect cup of coffee, a stranger's smile, the way sunlight hit the buildings at dusk. That kind of attentiveness is magnetic, not because it's performative, but because it's rare. Women don't just notice this quality, they're drawn to it. Why? Because a man who finds wonder in the ordinary isn't just pleasant to be around, he's telegraphing a deeper truth. I'm not starving for life to impress me. I'm already enchanted by it. Marcus Aurelius, despite the weight of an empire on his shoulders, began each morning with a ritual, listing things he was grateful for, from the loyalty of friends to the simplicity of bread. He called this taking inventory of the good. That's the Stoic twist. Gratitude isn't passive, it's a discipline. The modern equivalent: picture two men at a dimly lit bar. One complains about the slow service, the music, the crowd. The other leans back, savoring his drink, and remarks, "How lucky are we to have places like this?" A century ago, this moment wouldn't even be possible. Who would you rather share a conversation with? Who leaves an imprint? Gratitude isn't just a mood, it's a lens that transforms how you experience everything, and women can't help but lean into that energy. Here's where most men miss the mark. They think gratitude is about grand gestures, thanking the universe for promotions or romantic wins. Stoicism goes smaller, deeper. It's about finding the extraordinary in the mundane. Seneca wrote letters detailing his appreciation for the sound of rain on the roof, the warmth of a shared meal, the quiet hour before dawn. These weren't poetic flourishes, they were exercises in attention. When you train yourself to spot these micro moments of beauty, you stop needing external validation to feel alive. That self-sufficiency is catnip. A woman would rather sit with a man who finds joy in the crackle of a fireplace than one who needs constant adrenaline rushes to feel something. Practical shift: adopt the Stoic evening audit. Before bed, jot down 3 specific things that didn't go wrong today. Not generic, "I'm healthy," dig deeper. The barista remembered my order. My old friend sent a meme that made me laugh. I caught the train just in time. This isn't just journaling, it's rewiring your brain to spot gold in the gravel. Epictetus, born into poverty, taught that happiness doesn't come from acquiring more, but from appreciating what's already yours. When you internalize that, rejection stings less, setbacks feel smaller, and attraction becomes effortless. Because gratitude isn't just a feeling, it's a posture. Now contrast this with the guy who's always chasing the next high, the next match, the next date, the next ego boost. His energy is frantic, insatiable. Women sense this hunger and it's exhausting. But the man who's genuinely content, not complacent but content, he's not desperate for her approval because he's already full. And that's the ultimate paradox. The less you need someone to complete you, the more they'll want to be part of your world. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." That's the secret. Gratitude isn't just a mindset, it's a daily rebellion against dissatisfaction. And the man who wages that rebellion, he doesn't just attract women, he inspires them. Because in a world obsessed with lack, the rarest thing isn't perfection, it's appreciation, and that's a language every woman understands. Words are cheap, action is currency. The 24th Stoic mindset goes beyond keeping promises. It's about aligning your speech with your character so completely that your very presence becomes a guarantee. Women don't just notice reliability, they're disarmed by it, because in a world of ghosting, flaking, and empty intentions, a man who does what he says is a lighthouse in fog. Epictetus, who famously warned, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it," called this the foundation of trust, not grand oaths, but the quiet accumulation of showing up. Think of two men, one texts, "Let's definitely meet next week," with vague enthusiasm, then vanishes. The other sends, "Thursday, 7 p.m., the speakeasy on 5th. I'll be there," and is, who commands respect, who leaves an impression that lingers. Reliability isn't about being perfect, it's about being predictable in your integrity. The Stoics didn't worship flawless execution, they revered intentional execution. Seneca wrote letters chronicling his own failures to live up to his ideals, not as confessions but as reminders. Every kept word is a brick in the fortress of your reputation. Contrast this with the guy who cancels last minute because something better came up, or who habitually runs late as if his time matters more than others. That's not spontaneity, it's selfishness disguised as freedom. Women decode this instantly. The man who treats commitments lightly isn't just unreliable, he's revealing a deeper truth. He doesn't respect himself enough to honor his own word. Practical shift: adopt the Stoic pre-commitment rule. Before agreeing to anything, a date, a favor, a project, pause. Ask, "Can I do this without resentment or half-effort?" If not, decline with grace. Epictetus taught that every promise is a debt not to others but to your own self-concept. Modern dating is littered with men who overpromise to seem eager, then underdeliver when the thrill fades. The Stoic alternative: underpromise, then overdeliver. Instead of "I'll call you every day," try "Let's talk again Friday, I'll share that story I mentioned." Then call at noon sharp. That consistency isn't just courteous, it's seductive. Because when a woman realizes your words have weight, she leans in to hear them. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journals, "Let your every deed, word, and thought be that of one who might depart this life at any moment." That's the urgency of integrity. Not as a moral lecture, but as a strategic edge. The guy who RSVPs to parties he never attends, who swears he'll change but repeats old patterns, who treats plans as options rather than covenants. He's not just unreliable, he's teaching everyone around him not to take him seriously. But the man who treats his word as sovereign, who cancels only in true emergencies and does so with remorse. That's the man who doesn't just attract women, he earns their unwavering trust. Now contrast this with the modern epidemic of maybe culture. Maybe drinks, maybe weekends, maybe relationships. It's cowardice masquerading as flexibility. The Stoics would have scoffed. Epictetus, born a slave, knew the power of commitment. First say what you'd be, then do what you have to do. When you eliminate maybe from your vocabulary, when yes means yes and no means no, you don't just become more reliable, you become rare, and rarity, as any woman will tell you, is irresistible. Here's the secret women won't always articulate: they're not testing your promises in grand moments, they're watching the micro-commitments. Did you return the book you borrowed? Remember the condiment she hates. Show up when you said you would, even when it's inconvenient. These aren't chores, they're proofs. Every kept word, no matter how small, whispers, "You can rely on me." And that's a whisper louder than any love bomb. Because reliability isn't just about actions, it's the ultimate seduction of character. The man who keeps his word isn't just building trust, he's building legacy. And legacy, as the Stoics knew, outlasts every fleeting emotion. Attachment is suffering in disguise, especially when you cling to things outside your grasp. The final Stoic mindset is the ultimate liberation. Relinquish what you can't control and watch your magnetism multiply. Women don't just notice when a man is fixated on outcomes. They feel the tension in his posture, the hesitation in his voice, the way he checks his phone like it's a lifeline. But the man who radiates calm acceptance, he's not just at ease, he's in command. Picture two men post-breakup. One spirals, dissecting every text for hidden meanings while the other reflects. Either she comes back or makes space for something better. Who moves forward with dignity? Who leaves her wondering if she made a mistake? The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control, a concept so simple yet transformative that it reshapes how you navigate attraction. Epictetus framed it as two columns: what's yours to govern your actions, your effort, your integrity, and what isn't, her interest, her past, her moods. Modern dating drowns in the second column. Men obsess over, why hasn't she replied? Does she like me more than her ex? How do I make her commit? Stoicism slices through this noise. You don't control her feelings, you control how you show up. You don't dictate her choices, you decide your standards. That shift isn't just philosophical, it's palpable. Women sense when a man's peace isn't mortgaged to their whims, and that kind of emotional sovereignty is irresistible. Here's where most men get stuck. They mistake attachment for passion. They think caring means agonizing over every interaction, as if love is measured in anxiety. The Stoic alternative, amor fati, loving what is, not what you wish it to be. Imagine a first date where she mentions she's freshly single. The insecure guy panics. Is she over her ex? Am I a rebound? The Stoic stays present. That takes courage. What's something you've learned about yourself since then? No interrogation, no hidden agenda, just curiosity unclouded by insecurity. That's the power of detachment. It frees you to engage authentically without the desperation of needing it to go a certain way. Practical shift, practice mental relinquishment. When you catch yourself ruminating on her mixed signals or past relationships, visualize placing those thoughts in a box labeled "not mine." Then refocus on your column. Did I communicate clearly? Did I act with integrity? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The cucumber is bitter, throw it away. There are brambles in your path. Go around them." That's the essence. If a connection fades, mourn it briefly, then honor it by making space for what aligns. Now, contrast this with the guy who can't let go. He overthinks ghosting like it's a riddle to solve. He stays friends, hoping she'll change her mind. That energy isn't romantic, it's stagnant. Women recoil from neediness not because they're cruel, but because clinging violates a core truth. Attraction thrives in freedom, not captivity. The Stoic doesn't pretend indifference, he cultivates acceptance. He knows that releasing what isn't his to hold doesn't mean he didn't care. It means he cares enough to respect the natural flow of things. Seneca, exiled and stripped of his wealth, wrote, "Fate leads the willing, drags the unwilling." That's the final lesson. When you stop white-knuckling outcomes, you don't lose control, you reclaim it. And the man who moves through the world with that kind of graceful surrender, he doesn't just attract women. He invites them into a peace so rare they'll do anything to stay. We've walked through 25 Stoic mindsets, each one a thread in the tapestry of unmistakable magnetism. From unshakable confidence to radical responsibility, from mastering the pause to loving fate itself, these aren't just strategies. They're the architecture of a man who doesn't chase attraction. He commands it by sheer presence. Think back to where we started. The difference between gritting your teeth through life and becoming someone people lean toward instinctively. That gap isn't bridged by memorizing pickup lines or rehearsing charm. It's crossed by embodying principles so timeless they've outlasted empires. Consider the collective power here. Emotional control makes you a refuge in chaos. Purpose makes you a compass in uncertainty. Generosity without strings makes you rare in a world of transactions. And gratitude, that's the secret weapon, transforming what you have into more than enough. These mindsets don't just make you magnetic to women, they reshape how you experience life itself. The irony, the less you need external validation, the more it finds you. Not because you manipulated it, but because you became undeniable. Now, here's the challenge, the Stoic test. Don't try to overhaul your life overnight. That's ego, not wisdom. Choose one mindset this week, just one. Maybe it's pausing before reacting to a text that unsettles you. Maybe it's catching yourself when you seek approval and shifting to self-validation. Or perhaps it's finally taking that solo hike you've postponed, proving to yourself that you're company enough. Watch what happens, not just in how women respond, but in how you feel lighter, steadier, more at home in your own skin. This is where the comments come in. Tell me, which mindset struck a chord? Was it the power of presence, the art of detachment, the courage to own your flaws? Your insights don't just help you, they light the path for others. Because the real magic of Stoicism isn't in reading these words, it's in living them. So start small, but start today. The world doesn't need another man chasing shadows. It needs men who stand firm in their light, and that begins with you.